Both went through some devastation at the same time. I mean, Bill Holden died, Natalie died. Did that cement your friendship, going through that kind of tragedy together?
When you spend 14 hours a day with someone over a period of 5 years, you know, the shock wave of it was, the impact of it, you know, carried on for a long time.
For decades, Natalie Wood's death has remained one of Hollywood's most haunting mysteries. Now, Stefanie Powers has added new attention to the case with comments about Robert Wagner, her longtime friend and former co-star. Her perspective raises fresh questions about a night already marked by conflicting accounts, silence, and lasting suspicion. Why did Powers choose to speak after so many years? And do her words reveal overlooked details or simply deepen the uncertainty? As the public revisits this tragic story, one question remains. Will the truth ever fully emerge, or will Natalie Wood's final night remain forever unresolved? The silence before the storm. For years, Stefanie Powers remained a quiet presence amid one of Hollywood's longest mysteries. As Robert Wagner's longtime co-star and close confidant, her silence was notable, especially given the swirling rumors about Wagner's connection to Natalie Wood's tragic death. Powers never publicly addressed the murky details that haunted the actor's reputation, choosing instead to keep her distance from the most painful questions. Her reserved stance only deepened the air of secrecy around that fateful night, leaving fans and insiders to wonder what truths she might withhold. Then, at age 83, Powers broke decades of silence with an interview that shocked Hollywood. In revealing glimpses, she alluded to concealed pages in the autopsy report and hinted at omissions that blurred the true circumstances of Wood's death. Her carefully measured words suggested that important facts had been deliberately erased from the public record, raising the possibility of a cover-up. This sudden openness shattered the restrained narrative and reignited speculation after years of silence. Powers spoke not just of documents, but also of personal transformation. She described how Wagner's demeanor changed after Wood's death, becoming shadowed, distant, and haunted by his past. These observations painted a picture of a man burdened by something deeper than public grief, one wrestling with secrets kept in solitude. Yet Powers stopped short of direct accusations, leaving the question of Wagner's involvement hanging in the air. The timing of her revelations also deepened intrigue. Why choose now, after more than 4 decades of silence, to speak out? Powers herself suggested that the truth had long been obscured and that recent developments made it impossible to remain silent any longer. Her intervention reminded the public that many mysteries, no matter how deeply buried, can resurface when least expected. This set the stage for a renewed search for answers. Her nearness to Wagner across the years gave her something pretty few others could actually say they had: insights, and not just the surface ones. On screen, they looked like the perfect pair, all charm and this smooth synchronicity too. Off-screen, Powers was the type who grasped Wagner's more layered tensions and psychology. That kind of closeness lent real weight to what she said. It pulled people in because of the tiny changes she noticed in him, especially while the tragedy was unfolding. Still, that same closeness built trust. And now there was the heavy part of it, the disclosure. But even when she kept steering us toward concealed particulars, the complete story stayed almost just out of reach. Powers' restraint only deepened the aura of mystery, like the details were there, but not quite offered. Her hints suggested extra strata about what had been tucked away behind Hollywood's polished exterior for so long. It felt like her fresh voice could unlock chapters that many people privately hoped would never be forced open. And the public reaction came fast, kind of uneven in the way crowds do. Journalists and fans, both, went through her remarks carefully, hunting for hints that could confirm long-held suspicions. Her statements seemed to fit with leaked internal reports and with eyewitness accounts that had accumulated over the years, which made her version harder to dismiss. Yet, at the same time, those renewed signals sparked sharper arguments about what truly happened on that foggy night. The whole thing still contested, still unsettled. A larger question now demanded attention. If even someone as close to Wagner as Powers believed details had been buried, what might the broader reality be? Her openness moved the focus squarely back to Wagner's role and the unanswered doubts that continue to plague the case. It challenged Hollywood's carefully maintained silence and the official story for good, yes, but still, the silence that defined so many years was effectively broken. But the most important revelations were still to come. Powers had opened the door, sort of inviting a re-examination of a tragedy that has weighed on American culture and demanding a closer look at those tangled relationships at the center of it all. The night of November 28, 1981, off the coast of Catalina Island, would forever remain at the center of this mystery, as the details of what transpired that foggy evening continue to stir questions and speculation. The Catalina tragedy. That Thanksgiving night of 1981 began under a thick, haunting fog on the cold waters near Catalina Island, where a luxury yacht named Splendor was anchored. The vessel was frequently used by Robert Wagner for leisurely escapes, but that evening turned tragic when Natalie Wood's life came to an abrupt end. In the early hours of November 29th, her body was discovered floating near Avalon Harbor, a chilling and mysterious scene that instantly captured worldwide attention. Wood was found wearing a red nightgown, her life jacket oddly fastened backward, with wet hair tangled in seaweed and socks still on her feet. The autopsy reported bruises on her wrists, knees, and arms. However, these injuries were dismissed as post-mortem. Curiously, a more skeptical note from Dr. Thomas Noguchi, one of the country's foremost medical examiners, mentioned that these injuries are not consistent with a natural fall, yet his concerns were omitted from the official public report. The night prior had included dinner at Doug's Harbor Reef restaurant, where Wagner, Wood, and actor Christopher Walken, Wood's co-star at the time, were seen together. According to Wagner, the evening was pleasant, but staff recalled tension, with Wagner slamming a glass at one point and Wood remaining silent. Witnesses at the scene also reported Walken encouraging Wood's acting, while Wagner coldly insisted she belonged at home with family, hinting at underlying strain. Returning to the yacht around 10 p.m., the mood reportedly soured further. According to the captain, Dennis Davern, strange noises of arguing and breaking glass echoed shortly before an eerie silence fell over the boat. Wagner's report of Wood's disappearance came at 1:30 a.m., but others at the harbor claimed screams had been heard much earlier, suggesting possible delays or discrepancies in the official timeline. The initial police investigation concluded that Wood had fallen overboard while intoxicated, classifying the death as an accident. Yet, several critical details defied this simple explanation. The life jacket had no tears, contradicting what would be expected if she struggled to stay afloat. No tests were conducted for residue under her fingernails, despite visible scratches. The dinghy she allegedly used to leave the yacht remained tied securely, unused and intact. Adding to the mystery, some original crime scene photos were just missing for decades, and then they resurfaced in public files in 2011. Of course, those omissions made people side-eye the whole investigation for the most part, and also wonder about how transparent it really was. Questions like why Wood's life jacket was reversed, and why a woman who was afraid of water would go alone on deck on a cold night lingered for years, kind of like an itch you can't scratch. The story looked like it was slowly sliding toward closure until 2011, when Captain Davern went back on part of what he had said before. He claimed that Wagner reportedly flew into a rage that night and also kept searchlights from being used. That one piece of, let's say, testimony pushed attention back onto the case, and it eventually pushed the investigation back open again. By 2018, Wagner was labeled a person of interest, with the cause of death listed as undetermined. Even with decades of official and unofficial scrutiny, the Catalina tragedy still feels messy in the mind, full of contradictions and stuff that never got answered. Each new statement or revelation kind of peeled back one more layer, and somehow the whole thing became more urgent and more complicated at the same time. The yacht Splendor, plus the waters around Catalina, stayed stuck in the public imagination as a haunting symbol of a Hollywood mystery that refuses to rest. Meanwhile, with all this unresolved grief and confusion, public fascination keeps growing, mostly because of the personal dramas that were tangled up with it all. The layers of silence and secrecy only deepen the shadows over that cold, foggy night, and they set the stage for looking at the man whose image never quite recovered. Robert Wagner's polished public persona, once Hollywood's darling, now becomes the prism through which many view this haunting tragedy. Robert Wagner's public image. Robert Wagner emerged in the 1950s as one of Hollywood's most promising young stars, celebrated for his sophistication and classic leading man charm. Promoted by 20th Century Fox as the heir apparent to Clark Gable, Wagner captivated audiences with his handsome looks and charismatic presence. He quickly became synonymous with glamour, grace, and a seemingly impeccable life both on and off screen. He solidified his place in the public eye through his high-profile marriage to Natalie Wood, who was herself a shining star and rising icon. The couple was praised as Hollywood's golden couple, gracing magazine covers and public appearances hand in hand. Their relationship, broadcast live on ABC in 1957, seemed to embody every fairy tale ideal the entertainment world could offer. A true power couple admired by millions. Yet, behind the public image, cracks slowly began to form. Reports leaked of Wagner's jealousy and volatile temper, especially as Wood's career soared while his role in film diminished. Sources revealed tension on set, with Wagner allegedly showing possessiveness over Wood's male co-stars and directors. These stories hinted at a dark complexity beneath the polished veneer. Wagner's romantic life became a magnet for gossip and scandal. His relationships before and during his marriage included notable figures such as Barbara Stanwyck, who was 23 years his senior, and later other famous actresses and socialites. Despite Hollywood's strict conservatism at the time, particularly regarding age gaps and fidelity, Wagner's entanglements were no secret, and public scrutiny followed closely. Following his separation and brief divorce from Wood in the early 1960s, Wagner remarried and had a daughter. But that marriage also ended. His romance with Wood was rekindled in 1972, reigniting media fascination and offering hope of reconciliation. Yet even in their second marriage, instability surfaced. Reports of counseling and leaked notes suggested Wood feared Wagner's unpredictable anger. The 1981 tragedy shattered much of Wagner's carefully cultivated image. Once seen as the epitome of charm and stability, suspicions regarding his possible role in Wood's death marred his legacy. Media coverage intensified, with critics painting him as a figure of contradiction, simultaneously a grieving widower and a man shadowed by suspicion. Despite the cloud hanging over him, Wagner maintained a cautious silence, rarely addressing the allegations directly. His memoirs added fuel to the fire, as they sometimes contradicted known facts or witness accounts, deepening skepticism. Wagner's portrayal of events often centered him as a victim, leaving many unconvinced. This dissonance between public persona and private reality created a complex image of Wagner, one that Hollywood's golden boy was no longer just a symbol of glamour, but a man ensnared in a decades-long mystery. His story became inseparable from the tragedy of Catalina, merging myth, suspicion, and unresolved grief into the fabric of his legacy. As Stefanie Powers begins to peel back the layers with her revelations, the contrast between Wagner's public image and the deeper truths behind it comes sharply into focus, inviting a fresh perspective on a story many thought they understood. The powerful events of that Catalina night and Wagner's complicated reputation build toward the inner circle's revelations, where Stefanie Powers' voice adds a new dimension to this enduring mystery. Hollywood romances and scandals. Robert Wagner's off-screen life often seemed as dramatic as his movie roles. His romantic history, high-profile marriages, and constant tabloid attention shaped his image almost as much as his acting career. One of the most discussed relationships linked Wagner to Barbara Stanwyck, the legendary double indemnity star, who was more than 2 decades older than him. Their connection reportedly began in the early 1950s, when Wagner was still building his career. The press closely watched them, fascinated by the age gap and their different places in Hollywood. Rumors and late-night photographs fueled speculation, though much of their relationship remained private. Stanwyck was already an established icon, while Wagner was a rising leading man. Their bond challenged Hollywood expectations at a time when public image mattered deeply. Even after their closeness faded, Stanwyck was said to have remained an important influence in Wagner's life. Wagner later married Natalie Wood, one of Hollywood's brightest young stars. Their romance became a major media event after they met at a Christmas party and married in 1957. Their wedding at the Beverly Hills Hotel helped cement their image as a glamorous Hollywood couple. But behind the public admiration, reports suggested tension. As Wood's career soared, Wagner's popularity faced challenges. Friends and industry observers later described strains involving career pressure, insecurity, and conflicting expectations. Gossip about jealousy and possessiveness followed the couple, though such claims were often difficult to verify. Their relationship became one of Hollywood's most watched romances, defined by fame, passion, pressure, and a private complexity that the public could never fully see. By 1961, the press kinda blew up with reports tying Wagner to Swedish actress Anita Ekberg, the same one from La Dolce Vita. Tabloid photos seemed to show them hanging out in Palm Springs with captions like "The Nordic Rose" and "The Married Man." And, yeah, it only made Wagner's public image more complicated. The whole scandal threw dark shadows across his marriage, and a year later, Natalie filed for divorce, claiming irreconcilable differences. Even if her paperwork stayed away from airing private complaints in a loud way, the message still landed clearly, like there was a split that went past pure politics or simple convenience. After her separation from Wood, Wagner married the actress Marion Marshall in 1963, and they had a daughter named Katie. Still, even that union eventually fell apart, too. Those years felt like they were showing a person really trying to get stability, both at home and in his work life. Then, in a turn people did not see coming, Wagner reconnected with Wood in 1972 at a party hosted by Frank Sinatra. Their renewed romance led to a second marriage that shocked a lot of people, but it was also full of its own strain. They said they were trying to work through the old hurts, sometimes even attending marriage counseling, yet leaked notes from Dr. Eugene Landy, their therapist, suggested Wood was scared of Wagner's unpredictable anger. Those details added another layer, because they pointed to turbulence still sitting under all the polished smiles. This tangled web of relationships added layers to Wagner's already complicated persona. His charm and charisma, it sort of clashed with the rumors of volatility and control. It was a duality that left both fans and colleagues a little puzzled, you know? Those closest to Wagner said there was this kind of high allure in him, but also a darker emotional side. The kind only the people who really cared about him seemed to notice, maybe even understand. And those contradictions, they made the whole situation around Natalie Wood's death feel more fraught with suspicion, speculation, and that uneasy sense of what really happened. The dissonance between Wagner's glamorous public life and the stormy, rather private realities colored every conversation about him. Hollywood tends to romanticize stars' entanglements. It veers into myth fast, and in general, that's normal. But with Wagner, those stories felt weighty, not just gossip. As the whispers grew louder, they started to braid themselves with the mystery of Natalie Wood's untimely death, mixing affection, jealousy, and tragedy into a kind of narrative that's still argued about decades later. The family's determination to uncover what really happened that night brought an unyielding voice to the search for justice, a voice that refused to be silenced. The Wood family's fight. Natalie Wood's family never accepted the original conclusion that her death was an accident. Led by her sister, Lana Wood, they spent decades challenging questions and pushing for an investigation into what happened off Catalina Island. Lana pointed to details that troubled the family. Natalie was known to fear deep water, yet she was found in the ocean after disappearing from a yacht. Questions surrounded the position of her life jacket and differing accounts from those aboard the vessel. To the Wood family, these details did not fit the explanation of an accidental drowning. Their campaign gained new attention in 2011 when the Los Angeles County Sheriff's Department reopened the case. Dennis Davern, the yacht's captain, gave later statements that differed from earlier accounts. He alleged that there had been tension aboard the boat and said the search response was delayed. His claims renewed public debate, but they remained disputed and did not result in criminal charges. Investigators later re-examined evidence and changed Wood's cause of death from accidental drowning to drowning and other undetermined factors. Authorities said some injuries raised questions about how she entered the water. In 2018, Robert Wagner was named a person of interest, though he has never been charged and has denied responsibility. For Lana Wood, the fight was not about a headline or a cold case. It was about protecting her sister's memory and refusing to let unanswered questions disappear behind Hollywood's glamour. Through interviews, documentaries, and public advocacy, she kept the case in the public eye after many thought it had faded. The family's efforts exposed the deep divide between Natalie Wood's relatives and Wagner's side. While the Wood family called for greater transparency, Wagner and his representatives maintained there was no basis for accusing him of wrongdoing. That conflict created a lasting emotional rift, shaped by grief, suspicion, and years of conflicting accounts. No final legal resolution has ever arrived. Yet the Wood family's persistence changed public views of Natalie Wood's death. They helped reopen the investigation, brought overlooked details back into focus, and kept pressure on authorities to examine it. Their message remains simple. Natalie Wood was more than a Hollywood icon or a tragic mystery. She was a sister, a mother, and a daughter whose family believes the truth is still unfinished. Decades later, their search continues, not just for justice, but for the clarity that grief has denied them. The persistence of these unanswered questions and family disputes brings us back to the intimate circle around Wagner, where Stefanie Powers' recent revelations offer a new and deeply personal glimpse into years of hidden shadows. Revelations from Stefanie Powers. When Stefanie Powers reportedly broke her silence, it revived attention around the Natalie Wood death case. Powers had worked closely with Wagner, and her comments were presented as a view of how the tragedy changed him. The subject is shaped by incomplete records, conflicting accounts, and decades of public speculation. Powers claimed that, in 2012, she reviewed autopsy-related material that appeared different from the version available to the public. She described alleged references to bruises around Wood's wrists and scratches on her ribs, details she believed deserved more scrutiny. These claims challenged the familiar explanation of a fatal accident and raised questions about whether information had been overlooked, withheld, or misunderstood. She also spoke about Wagner's behavior after Wood's death. According to Powers, he became quieter, distracted, and emotionally changed. She recalled moments during the later years of Heart to Heart when he appeared weighed down by something he could not escape. Her portrayal did not directly accuse him of wrongdoing. Instead, it described a man who, in her view, carried the emotional consequences of a tragedy that never stopped following him. That distinction does matter, you know. Wagner hasn't been formally charged in connection with Wood's death, and so any telling of what happened really has to split what's verified from what's basically assumed. But Powers' remarks kind of reignited interest, partly because of her long friendship and that ongoing professional partnership with him. Her angle made folks wonder if the people nearest to the story had, in fact, seen more than they were willing to say out loud, publicly. And the reaction was pretty fast. Journalists, researchers, and the longtime followers of this case went back through old reports, witness statements, and the parts that were contested from that night. Wood disappeared near Catalina Island. For some, Powers' words gave more weight to questions that never really went anywhere. For others, it underscored how hard it is to reach solid conclusions decades after a really traumatic event. Her comments also brought back that wider talk about celebrity, influence, and silence, especially in Hollywood. Fame can steer which stories get attention, which witnesses seem credible, and which questions somehow manage to stay alive. The mystery around Natalie Wood has lasted in part because the people involved were famous, powerful, and able to hide behind carefully constructed public images, those smooth versions everyone sees. Powers' voice then added yet another messy chapter. Not a final answer, though. Her account invited scrutiny, while still reminding audiences that grief, memory, and public truth don't always line up neatly. Decades later, Natalie Wood's death is still unresolved, and the questions surrounding that night keep on casting a shadow over those tied to it today. The question of how years of silence and secrecy shaped Wagner's public legacy leads naturally into a deeper exploration of the lasting shadows the case has cast on all involved. The legacy of secrecy and suspicion. The years after Natalie Wood's death created a lasting legacy of secrecy, suspicion, and unanswered questions. Robert Wagner was publicly seen as a grieving husband, a polished Hollywood figure who spoke carefully about the tragedy. But behind that image, doubts continued to grow. The more time passed, the more people questioned whether the full story of that night had ever been told. Wagner rarely discussed the details openly. When he did speak, his comments were often brief, controlled, and emotional. Some people saw this as the behavior of a grieving man protecting his privacy. Others viewed it differently. To critics, his silence seemed evasive, creating even more room for rumors, theories, and public suspicion. His 2008 memoir, Pieces of My Heart, added another layer to the controversy. Wagner wrote about Natalie Wood, their relationship, and the pain of losing her. However, many readers felt that important details were missing. Critics argued that the account focused heavily on his grief while avoiding difficult questions surrounding the events on the boat. Other witnesses later gave descriptions that did not always match Wagner's version of the night. Over time, every interview and public appearance became heavily scrutinized. His solemn tone moved some viewers, but others believed it was carefully managed. He often avoided direct answers to tougher questions, which only deepened the divide. For supporters, he was a man trapped in an unbearable tragedy. For skeptics, he was someone controlling the public story without revealing everything. The case remained alive because Natalie Wood's family, investigators, journalists, and former witnesses continued to raise questions. New statements helped push authorities to revisit the original investigation. In 2018, Wagner was named a person of interest in the case, though he was never charged with a crime. That development brought renewed attention to a mystery that many believed had been buried by time. Hollywood itself also played a role. Fame, wealth, and public image can make it difficult for uncomfortable truths to surface. Wagner's star power gave him a level of protection in the public eye, while Natalie Wood's death became wrapped in glamour, tragedy, and speculation. Missing evidence, disputed accounts, and guarded statements became symbols of a system that often protects its biggest names. For Wagner, the result has been a complicated legacy. He remains remembered as a respected actor and a man who experienced profound loss. But he is also forever connected to an unresolved mystery that continues to divide public opinion. Stefanie Powers' recent comments have added another voice to that long-running conversation. Her willingness to speak reminds people that silence does not erase questions. Decades later, Natalie Wood's death still demands answers, and the shadow of suspicion surrounding Robert Wagner has never fully disappeared. The search for clarity continues, but Stefanie Powers' revelations invite us to consider what closure might look like in a story still unfolding beneath Hollywood's glittering surface. Searching for closure, the mystery surrounding Natalie Wood's death still haunts Hollywood decades later. Now, Stefanie Powers' recent comments have pushed the case back into the spotlight, reopening painful questions about what truly happened during that final night near Catalina Island. For years, the public was asked to accept a simple explanation, a tragic accident. But questions surrounding bruises, scratches, the strange placement of Wood's life jacket, conflicting accounts, have made that explanation difficult for many to accept. Powers' perspective, shaped by her long connection to those involved, adds another personal layer to a story long surrounded by silence. Still, the answers are painfully out of reach. Investigations have been reopened, new statements keep surfacing, and public interest hasn't really faded. Not fully, but no criminal charges have been filed, and the final truth stays unresolved. For Natalie's family, that uncertainty is not just something to watch or to trade as chatter. It's a wound that never quite heals, not all the way. Robert Wagner's name remains tied to the case, even as time keeps moving. Once he was known as one of Hollywood's most polished leading men, he now sits right in the middle of a mystery that keeps pushing on his public image. The story makes people look past fame, charm, and those carefully built reputations. Natalie Wood's death is bigger than a single celebrity tragedy. It points to how power, secrecy, and public image can shape what gets remembered, what gets questioned, or what simply gets skipped. It also highlights why accountability still matters, even when the truth is awkward, even when it hurts to face. Powers' choice to speak has meant the case will not just slip away into some soft Hollywood history. Her voice adds urgency to a search that has gone on for decades. Whether the full story will ever be known feels uncertain. The story of Natalie Wood, Robert Wagner, and Stefanie Powers reminds us that Hollywood's brightest lights can cast its darkest shadows. Powers' revelations may open the door to long-buried truths, but they also leave one haunting question. What really happened that night off Catalina Island? If this deep dive kept you thinking, like the video and subscribe for more stories behind fame, mystery, and silence. Then tap the next video on your screen. It takes you even deeper into another Hollywood secret that refuses to stay buried.